devalued human life itself and said they were unworthy even of living, and took eventually total revenge and genocide, and eventually took everything, called the indigenous people, and what I call earth-based values. So I thought, if I can get in the media or on a show to explain to people that the media is so scared of the truth and of that word, anarchism, and they have so distorted it that somebody who actually is an anarchist, which I am, along with being a vegetarian and an atheist, but I am spiritual as far as I believe spirit is telling the truth while you're living. Not wait until after you're dead, which I think is a problem with religion, organized religion. It doesn't challenge anything while people are alive. So I thought this is a good opportunity to straighten out the lies, the myths of what an anarchist is and how important anarchists are to America.
Now we're going to be bringing somebody else on the line, but I want to say this was the book that got my attention from at St. Mark's. Do you want to explain who these people are?
Sure.
These are going to call Rosie.
These people are called Zacco and Vanzetti. They were immigrants from Italy, came here in the 1890s, and there was a big movement against fascism in Europe at the time. And they came over here because there was a very big anti-fascist movement, and the anarchists were a very important part of starting unions that the liberal media, because to me, liberal, left, right, it's kind of doesn't mean anything anymore. It's just one big giant corporate lie. So the corporations have to lie and leave these people out. And I've had a lot of books about anarchism, but these are kind of special books they have. These books are direct letters from then when they were in prison before they were electrocuted in Massachusetts. And they were redone in English, but they're the exact sentiments, the exact words of their feelings about their families, the judge that framed them, the jury that framed them, how they were just scapegoated, and the people that actually committed the crime were never even found.
Anyway, I was so touched because he was reading it like poetry, or the letter was so moving, and I had just been to the Left Forum that you told me about at first, Harold. It was on your birthday that this event started, and I wanted to see actually today if I could have Rosalie be commenting on that. So I'd also like to include Rosalie Grable. She was one of the first researchers in 9/11,
okay.
And that's where I met you. So Harold, are you up for this adventure?
Well, yeah, sure. Welcome. Yeah, it's good.
Let me get Rosalie, sure. And then you can say what you know about anarchists, because it certainly opened my eyes up. Okay, hang on just a second. So this should be Rosalie if all goes well. Hey, Rosalie.
Yes.
We have on the line Harold Channer, and I'm joined by Richard Deacon, who I met at St. Mark's Church, and he read some very moving literature, and it certainly changed my mind and about what anarchists are, and it just sort of lifted up the whole vibe. So I thought maybe we could have a discussion, all of us, maybe starting with Harold, about what he might know about anarchists, because last Friday was your birthday, and we talked about Wilhelm Reich. So I thought today, what do you know, Harold, about anarchists? I knew nothing.
Oh, anarchos, there's a lot. I don't know, Emma Goldman might be in that class. I don't know. Maybe the fellow there with you.
Yes, Emma Goldman was one of the first feminists.
I associated with post-scarcity writing by Murray Bookchin, which I thought was really good. And they do, he's right, they do in the public consciousness see them with one of those round black bombs
in
their hand, and they're just out to destroy everything because they can't adjust to the social and economic order. And there's a lot of heroes in the anarcho camp, yeah.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Sure. I don't buy that at all. I know that's the public perception of anarchists.
Yeah, I was.
once they were simply of the belief that mankind can be self-governing, and there was no violent mean to that. That was added on later by the same people who want to keep their own monarchies and various kind of archies going.
Do you know anything about that, Richard? What she's talking about?
Well,
Synarchy was the opposite of anarchy.
Well,
Synarchy
true,
meaning
pure anarchism.
Ruled by the ones that the gods have appointed.
Well,
Hadn't heard that. Yeah, okay.
that's a new twist to anarchism on me. What I'm talking about is more just pure anarchism, that the belief people are not born evil, which is a religious concept. They can't control themselves. And that goes back to, are people born to hurt people? Are they like that naturally? Anarchists do not think people are born like that. They think it's imprinted in them, it's taught, violence is taught under every government. Obey authority, do not question anything. So when you're taught not to question anything, your emotional capabilities are going to be very limited to deal with anything. And schools are not meant to taught that. Schools are meant, might makes right, and make money. If there was different values, which I really call earth-based values, which is not valuing someone based on their stock market rates.
Stock market. By the way, stock market, tomorrow, Harold, at 12, we're going to have Robert Ashford calling us to sort of go along with the binary economics week that I'm having all this week. Yesterday, somehow they misplaced the first tape, so I'm hoping that people can keep up. Were you able to follow today?
Hold on, I've got a call coming. I have to take a second.
Okay,
Right, I'll hang on,
okay,
but
okay,
make it
okay,
disconnected. But
okay, okay. So anyway, I know people have a lot of concerns about paying their rent today.
Right.
They're very anxious.
Well, even
people.
anarchists did, believe me.
Even okay. So can
Even
you,
anarchists had to work.
So Rosalie, what more do you want to say on this?
Well, anarchy versus synarchy, synarchy. This needs to be looked up. It was an occult form from the 1800s, French in origin, holding up the notion that a certain bunch and class were given right by God to rule, and anybody who didn't like their rule, well, basically shouldn't have to live.
Well, synarchy, that doesn't sound very much like synchrony.
No, synarchy, synarchy, is the notion that a certain class and group was born to rule. And
So it's nothing to do with synchronous, where you synchronize.
yeah, it's just a commonality in the word that doesn't have any farther back meaning. And that's when anarchy was invented as the idea that men can, by cooperation, rule themselves.
yeah, they had that big system in Barcelona that went for quite a while. Mondragon or something like that. Yeah. But in the sin suffix or prefix is also related to the word synergy.
Right. But it doesn't sound very synergistic when you've got one big big bad ruling class that's beating up on everybody else.
Well, they don't see themselves as bad. They see themselves as inevitable.
And the march of
Well,
history.
but instead of inevitable, what about this? How come when everybody is so disappointed in the leaders and so angry and so upset, by being so angry and so upset and pointing their fingers at the leaders, it seems to be an implication that they're capitulating to the power of those leaders and not taking responsibility themselves. On the other hand, to take somebody who's in abject poverty and say that he's responsible for creating his reality seems a little ridiculous too.
Well, they've been ripping us off for a long time, while the people kind of look the other way or make excuses for the robbers who are ripping them off.
Yeah.
But what do you see, Harold?
Well, that all comports, and it just seems to me it goes back all through history. It seems to me, I don't know, there's always been a ruling class, whether it was the emperors in Rome or the kings and divine right of kings that came to be in feudal Europe or whatever, and now it's the investment banking class and so forth that's in the saddle. And then the people are not thought to be relevant to the decision makers and the opinion setters. And there's always been a ruling class like that.
You know, yesterday I had Barbara Rosenfeld over here and Gloria Messer, and Barbara is one of my only smoking friends, and she went out, and I guess I wasn't thinking, you know, she should have had a coat on, because when Molly goes out, she smokes outside. So she smoked in the hallway, and my neighbor came over and was so unbelievably upset. And this was a person who I had always sort of considered a friend. And he started to vent out so much, and I was so stunned because he was like shaking at the door.
Yeah.
And all I could think is that he's a stockbroker. And then Gloria later on, I said, well, what do you do? Because you're going along with the system, and you're blessed, and you're revered, and you're respected, because you've got the, you know, the perfect job. And then Gloria said, stealing is stealing. There's no morality. She said she was talking about organized crime that goes on at Wall Street. And yet, I know this is not a criminal, but I can see, and I felt such compassion. I also felt upset because, you know, he was angry at me. But
I could add a important quote if you want that.
yeah, add anything, because I'm floundering at the moment.
The Anarchists, basically, opinion is, and that goes back to not what I said, people are not born criminals, so they have this dilemma that they are so scared to be ostracized by groups. And your first group you're born into is your family. And the second group is whatever religion your family or non-religion tells you have to believe to belong to this group. 99% of the time, people do not want to be disowned.
Right.
I have been disowned. My brother was disowned because I'm an atheist. When I became a vegetarian, I was immediately disowned because I'm Irish. And I'm German.
You'd be disowned in spades.
Right. So when you're Irish and you say, no, you don't want to beat up black people, you like poor people, you don't want to become a fireman or a cop, you don't believe in religion anymore, but I'm very deeply, people say I'm very spiritual. But when I used to go to these churches, I said, these people, they say one thing, but as soon as you get out of the church, you hear such epithets against poor people, black people, gay people, but then they still keep giving money to these churches that just hate. And I'm not talking left or right, I'm just saying they just hate everybody, it's not them.
So what did the anarchists say?
So the anarchists, and this is why it might be relatives, I forget which one, but Sacco or Vanzetti, one of them used to be a right-wing Christian. And they gave that up because they said, you know what, it seems like this God they kind of go to every week has no relative really to poor people.
No relationship.
And no relations.
To the needs of poor people.
Yeah, and to people that are secular. That said, well, what is this God really doing for me at these churches? So they said, I'm giving this up and looking for something better.
So these are the original anarchists that were famous?
One of the original ones. Sacco and Vanzetti were the most famous next to Amy Goldman because people know they were framed. There's no way it was proved they did what they were accused of doing.
What were they accused of doing?
They were accused of robbing a holdup, kind of like a bank, at a transfer point, and accused of killing somebody, but I'm not sure, I forget if Sacco or Vanzetti had a gun, or they didn't at the scene, but they were not the type where they even committed crimes.
Right.
So they have to frame somebody.
Yeah, I think there was somebody, Bakunin, Kropotkin were in the anarcho camp, I think, or
Yes.
philosophical, in the modern experience.
Right. But before that, what people should know is they used to work a lot with the communists in the early days and the socialists. Because Hitler started as, quote, a socialist. But he was really sent as a spy to portray people. And that's where you get these dilemmas in. Sometimes people are just brainwashed because they don't want to be driven out of their first group. And psychologically wise, human beings are not very good when they're thrown out of a group. And like I
It
said,
might be worth mentioning, a lot of people associate that with anarchy, with disorder. And,
right, that's the corporate propaganda.
Inability to accept the institutions that cohere the society. So they just want anarchy, which is often just thrown out as, they just want disorder and throw over the apple cart.
Everybody the same size gravel.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the first, quote, boogeymen were the, the heathens, the indigenous people. Then the next group they had to pick on were poor people, which were all types of people. And poor people said, we're kind of tired of this, let's start a union.
Yeah.
But the unions are started by socialists and anarchists. And anarchists were a very important part in unions.
Yeah.
But,
and how do we
right.
differentiate the anarcho trend and the socialist trend, or how do we conciliate
Well,
them, or how do they relate to
socialists-
one another? They sometimes have common critiques of the society, but
Sometimes.
various alternate ways of going. Anarchists might move toward thinking we could have co-ops and cooperation, and probably, I guess, like it says, like you began, it goes back to basic assumptions about something called human nature.
right.
And, basic philosophical questions like that, I think.
Right, which they're not taught in school. They're just taught, people commit a crime, we put them in jail. The
Well,
cops,
that, and also
cops
just
take care
the
of that.
social Darwinistic view. We had Darwin giving us an idea of evolution, survival of the fittest,
right.
and, that kind of, and so they got a social Darwinistic view of the world and view of what human nature is. It's inherently greedy and acquisitional, partly because the leaders have that consciousness, and then opinion-making could inform the whole society about the basic question of what is human nature itself.
But before we get
relate to the evolving.
But before we get too comprehensive and philosophical, I want to call to Web Fairy's attention, Rosalie's attention, that right now there was a bomb that went off at Times Square, and the bomb went off in front of the recruiting station. I don't know.
Yes, that was just a few days ago.
I don't know if you know about that, but some were claiming that it was the 9/11 Truth Movement group. Now, We Are Change, that split off from Les's group that meets at St. Mark's Church, Les Jameson was more aggressive with taking cameras and going to politicians and asking them difficult questions. So, but having known these people, they exert themselves to be peaceful. Tom Foti and, a couple of them I worked with. But Nico Haupt, interestingly enough, who probably works the most alone outside of any group, I think through his work is probably going to be most instrumental to deflect the energy that's going towards We Are Change by making humor out of it. Now, Rosalie, I know that you were alarmed at his style of humor. Can you kind of elaborate on what your perspective is, and then let's see if we can work together, because you certainly know no matter what you've read about the anarchists, there's definitely a stigma that can be used against people.
Right.
So Rosalie, can you comment?
I think that it was the spookers themselves who bombed this
Yes, of course.
military thing.
Of course.
And of course, 911, quote, quote, truth makes good somebody to blame.
Right.
They're playing the role of the anarchists in the 20s.
Right. But what do you think? I mean, I know you were very alarmed about some comment Nico had made.
Nico saying he did it, or that we did it, or that we all did it.
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
But if you look at his work carefully, you can see he's all about deflecting a lot of these hidden, seething emotions and feelings that seem to be intensified because of ignorance and misunderstanding, and people not going into, say, the group consciousness thing, where if you're outcast, you're going to act against your own self-interest just for the sake of hugging onto your group. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the problem, because most of the time, they did this study about the human mind when they're younger, when you hit 5.
The anarchists did it? Or
no, it was an interesting study related to this, about imprinting.
But they don't know that then. I'm just saying, what did they know then? Because I know psychology is so advanced.
Right.
We have to buy
Well, back
products.
then, a lot of the anarchists, a lot of them were very highly functional as far as they had been in Europe, a lot of them, and some had grown here, and they had seen fascism. They had seen kings and queens just despise poor people, and they said, you know, but what do we do about it? We're just in this horrible suffering, in this cycle. And really what anarchy means is it's a Greek word. It means root.
Did you know that, Harold?
No, I didn't.
Anarchy means root?
Yeah.
It's a Greek word, right. It means root. All it really means is get to the root of the problem.
But
That's
I thought...
also a term that's used often for a radical perspective.
Yeah, I always thought radical meant root.
Radical can mean anything. It can mean left, right. It can mean a right-wing radical. It can mean a left-wing radical.
But it means root.
Sort of a
Right.
all-purpose prefix.
Right, like
I wonder
liberal.
if it might be
Who knows what that
interesting
means
to bring
anymore?
up or the attempts to conflate, let's say, anarchist attitudes or something, frustration, with what a larger thing that's being put out in the public a lot, terrorists. That the terrorists are just irrational people who are maybe personally or in a group sense frustrated, so they will attack and set off terrorist bombs and things like that. And that's a target of, I don't know if it's, if you can conflate the two possibly.
Now, the man that's there behind me, right, that I'm doing the split screen with, he is Michael Smith.
Yeah.
And he has a show on WBAI called Law and Disorder.
Yes.
But he was talking about a possible economic decline that's coming, and I felt like saying, you guys, you're in such an Ivy League tower. The homelessness is already here.
Yeah, I've been arrested. I got 8 tickets in 3 months for sleeping at St. George on the steps.
Are you homeless?
I finally found an activist friend I'm sleeping with,
Oh.
and as a squatter friend.
Oh.
But I mean, things are so bad that even these quote homeless groups won't help homeless people. And I wanted to sue the city for malicious prosecution because they gave me the same charge. I got about 8 tickets and 6 of them were the same charge, trespassing. But yet they let drug dealers stay there.
Really?
Because, yeah, the guy told me the cops let them stay there because they want to find bigger drug dealers. And a lot of them just pretend to be homeless because they deal drugs.
Oh my God.
So I said to the church, you know you let drug dealers sleep on your church and the cops leave them alone? But yet they don't know my name, but I'm sure I'm on all the files because I've been an activist with the big names for a long time, and I was a squatter during the riots in Tompkins Square. I was in those buildings when Giuliani came down with the tank, which the media kind of has forgotten about.
You mean an armored tank, like a military?
An actual tank. If you see the videotape during that era, in the 90s, they put us on TV live a lot of times in the mornings, and on the day of the eviction on 13th Street, which has now become Disneyland, and they're even destroying the old garden we have, and they're probably going to put a condo on there. They totally destroyed it. They've taken everything out. It's just dirt now. And it makes your heart drop because that's where I used to live. And that's where we used to have parties for the whole community in that garden. And it used to be an abandoned drug lot until people fixed it up. But unlike the garden movement, the other squatters, we kept it open for anybody. We didn't put a lock on it. We didn't privatize the garden. We said it's for everybody.
I had just watched your program today, Paula, with Bob.
Right.
Ashford.
Right. Well, that's why I was hoping to get Richard interested in binary economics.
Explain to me what it is, because I'm an anarchist.
Oh, I don't know if you
What
want
does
to
that
really
mean?
necessarily go there, but do you think it's true? I'm sorry, what's your name? I missed
Rich.
Richard?
Right, Richard, right.
Yeah, Richard. Okay.
Richard Deacon.
The tendency in the popular opinion poll, media and so forth, is to conflate anarchism, or do you think this is the case, with violence rather than, let's just say, protest, nonviolent protest.
I think
and that they will go over the edge in their frustration and say break windows when there's a march going on or something, and it's associated with disorder, and Ortega Gazette would rule.
Well, I'll give you a perfect
right against
example.
The masses being unwashed masses that are not.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. What I'm saying is, even leftists that you think know better don't know what anarchism is. They misuse the word all the time. Even Ralph Shulman, who should knows better, and I know him, you misused the word.
Web Fairy, can you comment on Ralph Shulman?
No, because I don't listen to him. He's a plane hugger, and that's all I
Got it.
make my decision.
Got it.
He's a Marxist, and he was the secretary to Bertrand Russell, who brought the People's Tribunal against the United States.
Right, he was very close friends with Malcolm X.
For the Vietnam War, among other things.
Are you disappointed that he doesn't understand anarchism?
I don't think anybody does. That's why I'm really happy you made me on the show. I know anarchists.
I know the feeling well, my brother. I might just say parenthetically that I was in the United States Army drafted. I'm older.
Right.
And I do know how to drive an M48 tank.
Really, Harold?
Yeah, they taught me how to drive
I'm sure
an M48
that's useful
tank.
for a job now, right?
Yeah. But anyway, see, the idea of we can't just protest, we can't just march with placards and say let's be good and all that, because the people in power won't listen, so a level of frustration comes in, and then you have the mass, like what happened.
They control you because you believe lies. They're able to control you because you believe lies.
Yeah, and those lies
if you're taken away from your lies, you'll find a fresh lie. But whatever is really, really true that could bring a revolution, a revolution that doesn't require violence or ruining everything. It requires being honest with oneself and with the universe and accepting what is, because there really is a singular, real reality that if we all could find that and cling to that, we could actually find a basis for agreement.
The problem is, what do you do with...
I call that divine connection. What do you call that? What do the anarchists call it?
I would call that a true revolution by the heart.
By the heart.
By the heart. Because even though I'm an anarchist, I'm an individualist. And I'm basically
anarcho is associated with individualism, I think, rather than collective, I think.
It can be both, because you're still...
Was originally is what it meant, was individuals cooperating cooperatively out of their own self-interest.
Right, that kind of thing. And there have been some examples. I think in
I can
Barcelona
give you examples.
In the 30s and so forth.
You had the Paris Commune, which actually had no cops, no jails, but there was no hunger, there were no poorhouses, there were no nursing homes. People were not thrown away based on their abilities or disabilities, or based upon their age, or whether their family needs them or wants them anymore, or whether they're viable to the economy.
And
these things really existed.
I can remember back to that Woodstock Festival in 1969. All of the authorities thought it was a disaster area, but people just gathered, and the food seemed to manifest, and everybody got along beautifully, and everything worked out, and it just sort of happened. And the people who are very worried about disorder, and also you had, Margaret Thatcher putting through a program with Mr. Reagan and so forth, and she came up with the term, what was it, Nina? There's no alternative to the system that's in place.
Right.
Tina.
Tina, that's right. There is no alternative to the system that's in place that so favors the already wealthy. And there's not a system that's proposed that can relate to the zeitgeist in a way that the future requires.
Great. Richard's going to read something inspiring right now.
I thought I'd read that.
Make sure your mic's good.
Okay.
Here, I just keep talking.
This is from Zacco and Renzetti. About some of their actual words in the jail cell before they were electrocuted, which is, I'm sure, very painful. Now, every time I think of you, I remember your wish to hear of my mother. Indeed, I sense it. My promises to speak to you of her. And each time I feel a little ashamed and regretful of my conduct, but also gladdened by all of this. But my good comrade, How can I speak to you of my mother while in this present physical and moral conditions, when homicidal impulses are hammering into my heart and skull? I hold my mother's memory as the sacredest thing to me. I feel an unspeakable responsibility at the very thought to speak of her to you, and my conditions do not allow me of it. It would be torture to me now, for I would really like to speak of my mother with the tongue of an archangel. I will do my best to improve myself and promise you that when a good hour will strike, you will have told me of my most good and admirable mother. I might have been crude and cruel, as ferocious in my posterior letters, but do not let it bother you. Mankind needs the acquisition of the facilities and forces to discern the truth and look into it. And this is about, he was very close to his family, very close to his mother. And a lot of them, people want to portray anarchists as these loners, these disturbed sociopaths.
Wow.
They have no feelings for family, children,
Rosalie,
you know.
let Rosalie speak, because she's a woman here.
Yeah, sure.
Rosalie,
Yeah?
what does that make you think?
Oh, it makes me, I was just bored and paying no attention. I'm sorry, but I'm not into that sort of flowery talk.
So you don't think that he was sincere?
I don't know if he was sincere. I know he was boring me and I was ignoring it.
See,
It was a really bad time to call on me.
See, Toka, I'm sorry, but it's just, to me, I feel one of the greatest happiness in my life is when I honor the family that I come from, including, by the way, Harold, my public access family.
Yeah.
And people that I create with. I think there's something about when a man and a woman come together and create a child, we only understand a very superficial part of that creation. And then the conditioning that they grow up in, we always think conditioning is only a bad thing. But I think to really, truly shed conditioning and to be liberated, you have to embrace the roots where you come from. So,
Right.
so for me, I found that to be very moving. But do you have anything, Harold, to say on that?
Well, only that the material reality alters through time, and like I've always, my quote, people are sick of hearing it, is James Joyce having Daedalus say history is a nightmare, which I'm attempting to awaken, and things change,